I am very glad, and I would like to thank once again for inviting me here to be a bit at home and in a place that used to be very important for shaping me when I was a teenager, when I came back from the United States. I graduated from an American high school. I was the first year that went to America when Poland and the US signed an agreement. I came back. I pretty much didn't know what to do with my life. And so I decided to study English philology, and not this building, but this place, this faculty was my home for 5 years. And I do hope one day to come back, but there's some justice to do in this world, and I am trying very hard to bring about the change that we have promised to the people of Poland last year when we won the elections. If you had asked me many, many years ago, would I ever imagine myself being in politics, I would probably say no. If you ask me, would you ever imagine yourself being the first minister for equality, I would say for sure no. But here I am, and it's a great honor to be here at the Faculty of English at this very special moment during the 5th edition of a very important event, the Language of Empowerment. Linguistics and language being one of those things I do love in life, besides the human brain and the wolves, which I value often more than people. I will tell you why at the end of this long story. And it's a great privilege and a great pleasure. And I was thinking about what should I leave you with? What's the message I want to deliver? What do I want to talk about standing here? I was asking myself a couple of questions. Should I focus on reminding the obvious truth about how inclusive language shapes the reality and quality of life, especially of those belonging to minority groups? Should it be a message conveying the story of success and hope that we have been carrying on for almost a year now, and the story of success that we want to build the change on? Or should I talk about dark times that are past us and the backlash of human rights, minorities' rights, women's rights, but also a backlash that I know personally because of my work that is coming to us again, especially in Europe, but not only. So when celebrating the advancement of human rights, this gender-sensitive approach, minorities' rights awareness, and the advancement in the language that we use, the sensitivity that we have towards minority group, LGBT people, and also women's rights, we cannot forget the role of the academia, the universities, and also the academia workers. So even if small steps of changes have been made in Poland, you were the ones making the changes possible, and we all know that. So keep up the good work. Language and reality are, of course, mutually reinforcing, and our language reflects the world around us and influences how we think and what we do. And this language can really affect the well-being and the quality of life of many people from the groups at risk of social exclusion or at risk of discrimination. Language based on stereotypes, bias, but also hate speech has an immense impact on individuals and whole communities. It is a very powerful tool, also a political tool, that can be used to bring people together, build strength, protect, but also to foster divisions, strengthen exclusion, to hurt, to strip of power, or even erase or make invisible in the public and social sphere. Discriminating language negatively impacts not only the productivity of minority groups, but can be life-threatening. How and by whom this discriminating language is used in politics, I believe you were able to see not only in Poland in the past 8 years. It was almost a decade of dark times during which politicians used this discriminating language, the hate speech, especially towards minority groups, LGBT groups, talking about them as if they weren't humans, calling them ideology, stripping them of humanity, dehumanizing them, only because of political reasons and only due to the political gains they wanted to have from that. We have a lot to turn around. We have many changes to bring. When I travel around Europe, when I meet with people from the US, but also my friends, colleagues, ministers for equality in the European Union, we talk about Poland as a success story, although when you look at the legislative changes, not much happened yet. Yes, we are working on the first governmental bill for the unions, and as Dr. Joanna has said, it's a hard fight. But it's happening. I would love for it to happen more quickly or faster. It's not, but I believe that the process during which we are working on this legislation is also a process of education and a process of bringing back the true meaning of words. Because when we look at the 8 years that were past us, when we look at those who came and stole from us democracy, those who buried human rights, those who buried women's rights, LGBT rights, we can see that there were some patterns that happened not only in Poland, but also in other European countries. Because those with an inkling of authoritarian regime who want to dismantle democracy always go with the same pattern, and they usually start with the language. They restructure the language. They change the meaning of words. They steal the language. I remember myself talking to my colleagues in the left coalition and saying, the right-wing parties stole the language of family. We have to regain it. We have to bring it back on our political agenda. We too, we also can talk about families. We understand families differently. But I felt at some point that we were ashamed to talk about families, as if the right-wing politicians and the right-wing parties and the ultra-conservative activists have won in saying only they were able to say what a family should look like, what should be the rights of a family, what should be the shape of a family. And so purposefully, we were working on trying to analyze the language they were using. A common practice for those ultra-conservative groups also is not only stealing the language and reversing the meaning of words, but also reversing the human rights concept. Whether you're Polish or you're from Poland or you're an international student sitting here at this audience, you probably heard about the story of the fight of the Polish women, the black protests, the fight for women's rights, for reproductive rights that we have started in 2016. That was actually the year I made the step forward toward the big politics. And when we started to try to be as professional as the other side, this anti-democratic side, anti-women's side, anti-LGBT side, we noticed that they were professional, they were well prepared, and that they were using the reversed human language concept. And when they were trying to ban abortion before the Constitutional Tribunal verdict, when they were talking about abortion ban, they were actually using in their narrative the words women's rights. We are protecting women fetuses from abortion. And so we noticed that the other side, or our side, the democratic side, also has to pay more attention to the language. And I'm talking about this because what we are doing right now after the election is, on the one hand, building the change. So we are working on different legislation, and the basis for my competences as the Minister for Equality, which not everybody knows, is an equality legislation, which is a transposition of a couple of European directives into the Polish law. And in these directives, there are certain premises, for example, gender, sexual orientation, but also ethnic background, on which we work to secure those groups from being discriminated. And if you look back at how to weaken the fight for human rights, when I took the competences to the Prime Minister's office where I work, I noticed that there was no financing for the equal treatment. We have national plan for equal treatment. It's a national plan. The time span is 10 years. And of course, there are some competences assigned to that, competences that I should be having, but also executing over local authorities, but there was no financing. So that is also one of the possible ways to weaken the fight for human rights and to weaken the work that the activists for years were doing. The LGBT rights in Poland and the activism that also Dr. Joanna was talking about has also a long history of fighting for basic rights. Being visible in the language is only one of them. Securing basic rights is the second one. Being free from hate speech is yet another one. And this is also something we are working on. We have a legislation, which is also a governmental legislation, to broaden the criminal code, the penal code, to include new premises, which are gender, age, disability, and sexual orientation, for those groups to be protected from hate speech. Because we know that the hate speech was, as I mentioned before, politically used as a political tool towards those minority groups by the former government. Democracy and the rule of law have been effectively dismantled not only in Poland, in Hungary and other European countries. And when you look also at the pattern, you see that praying or building the political agenda on the fear towards minority groups was usually built on the fear or on placing the enemy as the LGBT group. And it was the group that predominantly suffered in Poland, in Hungary, but is also suffering right now in Russia. The second group that was used as an enemy in the narrative, in the language, in the discourse, were the migrants, the refugees. And we still have this battle that we have to win, because we can still see some politicians, even on the democratic side, trying to shift towards this right-wing or alike right-wing narrative, when talking about refugees or migrants as a danger. It is something I'm warning my colleagues, and it's something I'm very careful about, because I believe you should not play with fire. We have a war over the border. Russia has invaded Ukraine, and Poland has opened the door for many Ukrainian war refugees, but we still have a humanitarian crisis on the Polish-Belarusian border. And regardless of who are the groups of people trying to cross the border, whether they're trying to cross it legally or illegally, it does not matter, and we should not put all of them into one group of illegal immigrants and treating them as a threat to our country. Language that we use in politics, not only the inclusive language that we purposefully build on the democratic side, but the narrative and the discourse is important for each of the changes we are trying to bring. I'm trying to think of this discussion also in the media that we have over the unions bill. And we are in the second phase now. Before the vacation time, in May and June, when we were discussing the possible governmental legislation, the debate was very heated. And it was really difficult to control the words some of the politicians were using. The words that were hurtful, that were discriminating towards this group, towards rainbow families, towards children that were being brought up in the rainbow families, excluding them from the society. A few weeks have passed, we have started the debate again, and I do feel a change right now. But we are more attentive, we are more careful with the words, not only us, but also the side that is not fully on our side when it comes to LGBT rights, let's say it this way. But they are more careful because we decided, and we talked about this, that the language we use in the media when debating about certain legislation will be also an echo that will be used by other people when talking about LGBT rights. So there is less emotion, there is more attention to the words that we use, and we see it's a very different debate. And the same kind of debate and the same kind of attention will be required from us when we'll be talking about this strategy for migrants, when we will be talking about refugees. And I want to assure you that we, as politicians, are fully aware of the fact that the language that we use in the media and the language that we use in Parliament should be less emotional, should be more focused on the legislation we work on or on the values that we came to politics with. But sometimes the other side is trying to purposefully bring the heat to the debate and use this discriminating language, and I hope it will stop with the hate speech legislation that we have drafted and we will be voting in the Polish Parliament. When talking about human rights and the dangers to human rights, to LGBT rights, to women's rights, to minorities' rights, I'm also thinking about the danger I can see not only in the documents that are drafted in some European countries, because we know a second wave of backlash is coming, A second wave of populism is coming to Europe, so we know all about that. But I can also see in the geopolitical situation that we are facing. Of course, we're waiting for the results of the election in the United States, but as Poland, we are in a very difficult geopolitical situation with the war over the border, and we can see that the politics and the political agenda is mainly centered around military safety. So all the financing goes to the military, and the military safety is a priority. And it's an agenda that is difficult to say no to, because we know that the society wants to feel safe, of course. But we also, and this is my role in the government, that we also have to remember that when talking about safety, when talking about military, financing for military, somehow the human rights are being pushed aside as less important, and it's not true. Nevertheless, of what the geopolitical situation is, or if there is a war over the border, we should remember that human rights, women's rights, minorities' rights should stay in the center of the political agenda, because they are as important now as they would be important if there is or was a war in any country. My role is to rebuild what has been crushed down. So my role is to rebuild an equality department working in the Prime Minister's office, starting from fundamental work on equal treatment and combating discrimination against those minority groups, but also working on combating violence against women and gender-based violence. Women and girls have also been erased from the language of this agenda of combating violence, because although Poland ratified the Istanbul Convention, Poland decided to talk only about domestic violence and not to focus on gender-based violence, because we know that the most dangerous word that the previous government was afraid of was the word gender. It was the story and everything around the word gender was built so that it was the most dangerous monster. And when we analyze now some international documents of the former plenipotentiaries for equal treatment, this was something they were mostly centered around and mostly interested in. They wanted to erase women, they wanted to erase girls, they erased from international documents LGBT minorities groups, and they focused only on the domestic violence, where there was some financing, and they took out all the financing from equal treatment. Now, what we are doing is changing all the programs for the next 4 or 5 years, and when we look at this national program for equal treatment, there are 2 points we want to focus on that I believe were lacking in the past years. The first one is education, and is also something you are doing here at the universities. And the second one is collecting data. We're using European funds to collect data about equal treatment, about discriminated groups, because when we started drafting the governmental bill for the unions, we noticed that there is even no data. How can we talk about the groups that are discriminated, or about the groups within the realm of human rights that need governmental support and systematic support, if we do not know who needs this support, in what areas, and in what aspects? So we will focus in the next few years on using the European money, using international money to build a big data around this topic of equal treatment. But we want to also devote some money from the European Union and some international money to also draft a language analysis around equal treatment. And we want to help, well, we'll be for sure using your knowledge, because at the university level and at local levels, for the past years, 8 years, I believe there were some good models being worked out. Because what was not happening on the central level was actually happening on the local level. So we will use your experience, but we are also willing to cooperate and work with you to help, to analyze, to get data, and to build a fundament that would never be crushed down, because we can foresee that if a different government comes into power, it might do what it has done again. So it might say there is no problem with equal treatment in Poland, there are no discriminated group, there is no data, we don't need any financing. This is what's happening also in some European countries. We hear Austria, we hear France, we hear other European countries who are saying we will be cutting the funds and cutting the money for equal treatment. We think the progress has gone too far, and we want to step back. So I believe that what we need to do in Poland is to focus on really living up to the expectations that many European countries put upon us. If we really want to be the success story, if we really want to bring hope, we need to build strong fundamentals and also build strong roots. And I know that many young people, especially students, studying at the universities, were the ones who helped us win the elections last year, because the high turnout in Poland was mainly due to young people, mainly due to women. And I can only hope that my government will bring about all the change that it has promised to you, because I know that where we are now and the change we are doing right now is only possible because of you, and because of the fact that you went and voted for us. So I want to thank you for that. Thank you very much.